Hi, folks. Welcome to Let's Talk It Over. I'm Ken Weene, and with me, my wonderful co-host, Monica Brinkman. And with Monica, her great cat, Henry. Good morning,
Yes.
Henry. And Henry, we have somebody we'd like you to meet, too.
Look at
Henry, this is our newest sloth family member. This is Josephus.
Say hi.
Josephus is a very, very loving sloth. He, he just gets along with
Younger
everybody
sloth.
in the house.
Than Thackeray.
Oh, Thackeray is particularly fond of Josephus. Josephus came to live with us a couple weeks ago. He is the gift of some people we love very much. Two friends. The gentleman is an IT person, which is kind of strange for me to have an IT friend, but he's a great guy.
Yeah.
And his wife is Korean American, and which kind of leads me into our topic today. But anyway, she brought Josephus to live with us, and the question was, were the pygmy sloths, as you can see, Josephus is quite small.
Yes, he is.
Sloths going to replace the standard size sloths like Thackeray in the house. And that brings up today's topic, replacement theory. Oh, wow. What a strange.
Yeah, it's something we need to talk about. Yeah.
We do. Recently, of course, it's become kind of a deadly topic in this country with, very sick people using it as an excuse to kill other people, totally innocent people. So let's talk about what replacement theory is. Now, there are two parts to it.
Okay.
One part is the historical and kind of like almost an evolutionary kind of view. And the other is the intentional. So I want to distinguish between those two right off the bat.
Yes.
Intentional theory goes like this. The Democratic Party is deliberately encouraging the growth of non-white population in this country in order to get political power. That they are planning to bring in all of these black, brown, green, purple, I don't know, people from all over the world, and that they're going to then use those people to replace, to outvote the white people.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, and of course, under this is amnesty kind of deal. The idea that they are planning to do this through giving amnesty. By the way, you know which president signed on to the largest amnesty in American history, don't you? I mean, after
it was a Republican president.
Oh yeah, Ronnie Reagan.
Yes,
of course. But anyway, so that's that theory, which is bizarro theory because, in point of fact, there is no evidence to support it. And in fact, if you look at, for example, the number of people being stopped at the border, evidently, according to the numbers I've seen, the immigration services are doing a better job stopping people now than they did under Trump.
So they returned 250,000 people back to, their shores and didn't let them in, but you never hear about that.
Right. But what we do have going on is, in fact, historically real, and that is replacement. So before we start saying, well, wait, I just want to remind people, now we have a group of people in this country that a lot of the people on the right try to forget. They're called Native Americans.
Yes.
And they are evidence that replacement does take place. And what's more, they are evidence that that kind of intentional replacement takes place. I mean, think about Andy Jackson sending the Native Americans of Tennessee on the Trail of Tears. I mean, hey, folks, we did it. We were the ones who deliberately decided to replace a population. Okay?
So yeah, and that's history, and it's fact, and people can double check all they want, They will find it as fact.
I live in driving distance of Texas. I'm in Tucson, Arizona. I can get in my car and within the day get to El Paso. I don't know why I'd want to go to El Paso. I mean, I've been there. It's a nice enough city, but I could do that. Okay. Now, if you look at Texas, when the Mexicans were there, okay, again, it was intentional replacement or displacement going on. It was absolutely decided by the European Americans, the Yankees, the us from Kentucky and places like that, with like people like Daniel Boone, people like that we were, Davy Crockett, that we were gonna displace and replace the Mexicans, and we did.
Yes.
Okay? I mean, let's be honest. This kind of behavior historically happened. But what's going on now is something very different. What's going on now is demographic. And what it is, quite simply, is that we, and by we, I mean, white America, we are not reproducing at a very high rate, as is true of most people when they have more economic well-being. Okay? So we're not reproducing, and other people are. Part of that is, in fact, because poverty leads to reproduction. Part of it is because poverty and leads to poor education, and poor education leads to poor choices about birth control. I mean, we know that as people's income goes up, they reproduce less. There's a lag, but it happens.
And also, people have been intermarrying. So you could have a Caucasian person and, a Black person produce a child. Now, the child has both characteristics, but if their skin is a darker color, they're considered Black.
Yes, that's
all. Really, if you look at it, they're both.
Yeah. And of course, I had just mentioned at the beginning when I was introducing Josephus that the couple who gave him to us, they are a mixed couple.
Yes.
And in point of fact, they're only raising dogs. They don't want to have children. And that's also part of it. A lot of people, as you get up into the higher education, more people don't want to have. So we have this problem, okay, of demographically, if you look at the numbers, we, again, when we, I mean white American, we are moving toward would be a plurality, but we're not going to be a majority much longer. And then at some point, long after I'm gone, of course, we won't even be that.
Yeah, I mean, a long time ago, they predicted that the world would eventually be made up of brown people.
Yes.
Not Black, not white, not Indian, but brown people.
Right. And is that a problem?
I don't see it as one, but there's some people that might. But if they feel so strongly, why don't they start reproducing then?
Well, interestingly enough,
instead of killing people, they're talking about saving lives all the time. Let's reproduce then if you want more.
Interestingly enough, that's that it does overlap with those who want to ban abortion.
Mm-hmm.
But what we know is that banning abortion is going to increase the number of black, brown births way more than it's going to increase the white births. That's part of the bizarro quality of all of this is it's
yeah,
very,
all we have to do is look back in history when abortion was banned to see.
Mm-hmm. Well, we also know who uses those abortion services. Okay, now part of what's going on then is this fear about race. Now, does race exist? And that's a very interesting question. We know species doesn't exist. We may be different breeds like dogs.
Well,
but we are certainly not different species because we can all interbreed. In theory, I can have successful sex with an Aborigine from Australia, or I can have, or a pygmy from Africa, and we will have offspring, and our offspring will be able to breed. Okay, that's the point. That's the definition of a species. Okay.
Well, when the species arrived, though, Ken, the different colors of the skin were more so as to the climate that they were living under.
We don't know. We don't know. Okay, we know that there were at least 3 or 4 proto-hominid species that or forms, and they bred. Modern man is not modern humans are not the result of a straight line, Neanderthal, Devonian. We have these, and that's part of what makes it all very fascinating. So, and we know that there are, for example, there are going to be genetic differences depending upon, or your skin color is going to depend to some degree on genetic difference.
Yes.
And some other things. Now, one of the fascinating things is that if you take an X-ray of a human being of any skin color and you show it to a doctor, they cannot tell you what race, what skin color that person had. They can tell you if they're healthy or sick, if they had a broken bone or not a broken bone. They can tell all those medical things, but they can't tell you race. A computer can. So we know that that's a very interesting thing. Why? Well, my guess is because a computer can tell very, very slight differences in the amount of blockage of image, because skin color will affect the absorption of the X-rays, the passing of the X-rays. But anyway, so does race exist, and does it matter? Should it matter? I think that's the more important thing. Now, for years, I'm from a psychology background, and for years, one of the things that went on was people were desperately trying to show that there were differences. Phrenology. They were trying to feel people's heads and decide that somehow or other, in fact, I get into that a little bit in one of my books, Red and White, because that was a big thing with the Native American schools, which of course have been in the news lately for how awful they were. And phrenology was one of the things that, you can't learn because you have this bump here. There was no bump. There was nothing like that. There was no reality to it. Then there were people who were pouring rocks into skulls, demonstrating differences in brain size, because clearly but the problem was often they were doing things like, they take the skull, pour rocks in and go like this, bouncing it on the table a little so the rocks would settle, and then they get more rocks in for the white skull than they would for the black skull, Things, crazy shit like that. one of the things, I mean, another one was IQ testing, which of course, was going around jackass. IQ was supposed to predict school achievement. Now,
Yeah.
we know that if you are in like consider like Pretty Brown versus Board of Education schools. Hey, if you give the same test to the kid who is studying in that school with no books, cracked chalkboard, and etc., and you give that same test to another kid who is going to a very high level school, the kid who's going to the better school is going to have a higher performance. So you'd expect IQ tests to reflect that, and they did. It wasn't that black kids had less intelligence. It was that IQ tests were designed to predict school performance, and in color predicted school performance. Hell, one of the ways you could improve the validity of an IQ test, if you really wanted to do it statistically, would be to subtract 10 points for the color of the kid's skin. Then it would make it more accurate. Because
that's true. That's been a problem for a long time. That's been a problem for a long time.
Oh, yeah. Sure. And, anybody who worked with schools can tell you that, just the way we were taught to talk about kids. The white kid who's hyperactive is inquisitive and curious. The black kid is hyperactive and disruptive.
We were taught to be racist when I was young.
Oh, absolutely. I was not particularly taught to be racist because I was part of basically what is systematic racism. There was one black kid in my middle school, and I actually happened to be in love with her. But, there was, when there's only one black kid, nobody notices race. My high school, there was one black kid in the whole school. Again, I didn't really realize that racism and what race was until I got to me in my teens, and I went down to Florida, and we were driving back. So I have an essay on that on my website. But it's like, holy shit, I didn't realize it. But yes, it was built into our society.
And we were taught things that were so untrue. Not that I ever believed it, but I know what I was taught to believe and what was represented to me when I was younger. And I mean, we were told things like black people are lazy. Mm-hmm. Black people have less intelligence than us. Mm-hmm.
Black men are unable to control their sexuality.
Yeah, things like this. Now, I think one of the problems we're having right now, Ken, is that's been proven so wrong. So, some of the most intelligent representatives we have in our governments are black people. They're also Mexican people. They're Indian. We're starting to have a more diverse representation, and people are seeing, oh my goodness, these people are intelligent.
And that becomes, now we're getting back to the reality of replacement.
Yes.
Okay. I think that this country was not prepared to have Barack Obama as president. Now, I think he was a good president. I don't know that he was the best president in our history.
He was okay.
There were things I would have liked to have seen him get us out of Afghanistan and do it rationally. I would have liked him to change education differently than the way they tried.
And the health coverage, I would like to be so much.
He got health coverage. I mean, that was his major accomplishment, was to at least start. And that way we can get into the whole discussion of
Yeah, we'll talk about that another time.
Yeah. But the thing was that this country was not prepared to accept the idea that there could be a black man and a black woman in the White House, and that that black man and that black woman could be really worthy leaders. Because in doing that, it was a statement that fear that people had of being replaced, that replacement fear was just, just aggravated.
I think the minority of people even feel that way in this country, though. I think the people that are so concerned about this and so worried about it are the very wealthy people.
Oh, no.
Who are going to lose control. And that's why they've ramped up all this.
They're not worried about racial replacement. They're fine with it. What they're doing is they're using it because they're fearful of losing economic control. And if I can get you to believe that the guy who was running against me or running against my candidate, I have a candidate, okay? And if I can get you to believe that that the candidate who's running against my candidate is going to hurt you, then you're going to vote for my candidate. Okay. The fear is, because what is the rest?
How does that hurt me, having different races? I mean,
but you see, that's where the whole idea of this replacement theory comes in. Okay, you're going to lose your advantage, and there's a reality to it too. By the way, let's not belittle or ignore the reality. Okay, I'll go with one specific example. In New York City, for a long time, Italian Americans were the sanitation department and the private sanitation.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Now, they open it up, for civil service exams, etc. And you have a lot of blacks, Mexicans, Puerto Ricans, who are Americans, but
yes,
you have all these people who now want these relatively decent jobs. Driving a garbage truck is not, it's not a bad job. You make a decent living. They do have a higher injury rate than the police and fire department because it's heavy lifting. Mm-hmm. Actually, if you want to realize that they are the ones who have the higher job-related injury. But, the Italian Americans in New York were understandably very put out because their advantage in getting hired was disappearing. I'm a garbage collector. I want my kid hired. Sure, come on, Sonny. And now that advantage was gone. And if Sonny didn't graduate high school, didn't do well on a written test or whatever was required, he didn't get the job. Now, I have a college education, okay? I went to an Ivy League school, but it was the same thing there, okay? We called them legacies. Probably about half of my class, their fathers had gone to Princeton.
And it's been like that in college a long time.
Yes, and now all of a sudden you introduce merit exams and you outlaw quotas, and now it changes. It changes. Michelle Obama is a Princeton graduate. Well, first of all, she's a woman. Well, when I was there, it was men.
That's another thing.
Sorry. But
I think they're afraid of women also.
Oh, yeah, but she is a black woman, okay? Now, a brilliant, energetic, charismatic, fabulous woman who happens also, in my particular perception, to be quite attractive, but beyond that, about her character, her intelligence, all of that's so great. Well, but just think of all of those legacy families who might have a daughter and might want them, if we're going to have women at Princeton, why can't my daughter be in that? And now you have this young woman who's from a working class family in Detroit, Chicago rather, from Chicago, working class. And she gets in because she is intelligent and and all those things. And it's threatening. So there is a reality here. People are afraid that if society is open, they and their children will somehow lose the benefits. The funny thing is, the bizarre.
You don't understand. They're going to have equal territory.
But that's losing benefit. Okay, if I got preference before, if I went into a bank to get a mortgage, and a black man who was earning the same amount went in and wanted and had the same education, whatever, and he wanted a mortgage, I would get the mortgage first. Now
that's how it used to be.
No longer should be the case. And you and I agree it shouldn't be the case. But the man for who is then denied a mortgage now says, but I should have gotten it and that black guy did. And that's what we have to understand. These people are feeling displaced. The problem is, the really bizarre thing is that the people who are feeling most displaced really are not being displaced. Like if you go to places like Mississippi, places like where this Trumpian MAGA mentality is most in sway, what you're really seeing is that most of those people who are voting in that far are really not being displaced. They're people living in one form or another on the edge. They're living on the edge. They are dependent often on food stamps. They are dependent often on Medicaid. They're dependent often on welfare. Their kids are not going to college. They're the ones often who are using meth and things like that. It really, from what I've seen, that the number of people on the far right who are feeling this, who are being manipulated to believe in this replacement theory, are not being replaced. They are already off the grid. And that's really the saddest part of it. And that's been an American tradition going way, way back to when the Scots-Irish were brought in and settled in Appalachia and in places like that as a counterweight to the number of Africans who were being brought. There was a point in time in this country when the plantation owners in the islands, particularly, realized that they were going to face revolution. Okay? They were facing revolution because you have a white plantation owner. He maybe has a white overseer. Then the four people under that are black. They're slaves, but they're like capos in the concentration camps. And then you have the blacks like, well, and you got a gun. By the way, you don't have machine guns. You got this thing you have to load each time. You're not going to survive. You're not. Sorry, but you're not, because you have like 2 or 3 guns and you got 100 slaves. You may shoot 4 or 5 of them, but the rest are going to kill you. As the Brits found out in Kenya, that's when they left Kenya, it was because the Mau figured it out. Yeah, you can kill a half dozen of us, but the 7
all of us, yeah.
And worse, you have to have weapons there. You can't cut sugar cane without a machete. It was a no-win, and so a lot of these slaves were brought into the Carolinas. And when that happened, the British government quite consciously wanted the counterbalance. So they brought these people in and said, see, you're not them. You're better than them. And those people to this day still have that in their culture. And that's the root of replacement theory.
I just think it's time that we welcomed all different races into our land. And we're supposed to be giving equal opportunity to all.
Who says that?
It's freedom that we can have equal. I'm not talking about people that are born with a silver spoon in their mouth and, you know, all that, but I'm talking about all of us. We have choices of jobs that we want, education that we want.
But you're saying something about we should, as if we've all agreed on it. We should welcome all races.
Well, obviously, we haven't all agreed on this, but
yeah, exactly.
Or we wouldn't have a third of the country, or a little less, maybe, reacting in such a hard way.
Oh, I think it's probably more on the order of under 20% of the country.
Yeah,
you know, I think that the people who have these extreme views are really a minority. I think.
But what's so sad, Ken, is they've brought it into our government, into our politics.
That's the real problem. The real problem is, in this country, we have a bipolar political system, and that allows the extremes to run things. Okay. At one time, the people who were running the two political parties at one time, they basically were making a real effort to find middle ground. Now, that part of that finding middle ground was avoiding certain discussions. Like, there were no discussions of the rights of Black people.
No.
or Native Americans, or people who came here from Spanish-speaking Central and South America. These are, since World War II, there were all these issues have come into being. And as that's happened, the parties, I think, have become more extreme because the people on the edges have taken over. Now, particularly, sadly, from my perspective, on the right, but also on the left.
Yes.
There are people in the Democratic Party now who have major voice, who are far to the left of, like, Eugene Debs and people like that. And there are people on the right who, we recently had a Supreme Court judge who was citing somebody from, like, the 14th, 15th century.
Oh, my word. I know. And it was a man that killed witches. I mean, he killed women who weren't witches and said they were.
Yeah, and he believed in spectral evidence, too.
That tells you a lot about that judge.
So we have these extremes of right and left in this country that, to me, are missing the point. The only way you can have a wholly and truly integrated society is one in which the middle becomes the norm. And the norm for the political process, as well as.
Well, that's what we used to strive to do. They would work together until they came to a middle ground.
Right.
Unfortunately, most of their middle ground means that the middle class is being taxed all the time.
I think that that's some part of it. I think that one of the problems is, that one of the real problems is that we as a society have become preoccupied with money. Economic theory, and as you know, I have my bachelor's degree many years ago in economics, but economic theory is just one view of life. It's one way of looking at life.
Yeah.
And we have become so dominated by the notion of it being our money. Now, it isn't even meaningful money without government. Money means nothing unless the government is there to enforce it as a way of settling contracts. Okay? Otherwise, we're back at barter. And that, I'm going to tell you, if you and I are bartering for something, the last thing I want from you is a piece of green paper that's too coarse to wipe my ass or blow my nose. Okay? That money is only good because of the fact that we have faith in the government and the right that it can enforce that money is in fact the way we settle debts. Okay? If we take that away, if we take the process of government away, because we think money and our freedom to have money is more important than government, then the money ceases to be of any use. Now,
Yeah, no, pure and simple. Yeah. Can't argue with that at all.
Yeah. And I'll give you, a very simple example that's going on right now. I don't care how much money you have. You can't find formula for your kid.
Right.
Okay? And that's pretty serious stuff. And that is, by the way, at least to some degree, a result of our overbelief that economics and economy and money are what is the central role of government, rather than the well-being of the people.
Yeah, that just hit it on the nail on the head, Ken. The people should be first.
And when you have too much concentration of wealth and power in anything, and in this case, it was in the manufacture of formula, it leads to problems. Now, there's a double problem in that field, because not only was the industry concentrated, but the dairy producers pushed to have formula, a tariff on formula, no matter where it comes from. And even when NAFTA was created, one of the things in NAFTA is, you can't bring formula in from Canada without paying a high tariff. You can't bring it in from Mexico. You can't bring it in from most favored nations in Europe. So right now, families are paying the price of the greed, but the fear of the dairy producers. Now, in a better society, you say, okay, we need to make sure our dairy producers are okay. And that means that we sometimes have to subsidize them, and sometimes we take the subsidies away, depending on the price. It's particularly difficult in the dairy industry because, of course, cows, they're not a seasonal crop.
No.
And so you have to think a long way ahead, and sometimes you have to, figure out what you're going to do with the excess milk and how you're going to store milk and a whole bunch of things. Now, we used to do that routinely after the Second World War with corn and wheat. And is it a perfect system? No, it was never a perfect system, but at least we knew that farmers were going to be okay. Now, we create these crazy ass rules, like you can't, and now we need formula. And if you live near the border, you can drive across the border, bring back formula for your kid. But if you send a truck across the border to bring back a whole truck full of formula for your grocery store, no, that's not allowed.
Can't do that, no. Yeah, well, they said that their formula was contaminated, so that's another issue.
Well, when you concentrate production, that can happen. See, that's what happened is Abbott, which is a fairly decent company, but you have a problem in one key plant, and we don't have backup again because we have made being the biggest. We used to have laws in this country. You couldn't have that much concentration.
Exactly. I mean, and businesses, they would charge the same pricing also. They had rules on that, and you were allowed to talk to your competitor. They would have meetings for industry events and such, or they'd all get together.
Well, they still do, but the problem was not.
Yeah, but they're not allowed to talk about pricing or anything like they used to be able to.
Well, that led to problems too. Okay, the real goal should be to have a market that makes sense, and having a market that makes sense is not that easy. We can get into economic theory and the donut theory, modern donut theory of economics. But, okay, the biggest problem we have right now is that the businesses are concentrated. It isn't that they're not, it's not that they're not competing, it's that there's no competition to be found.
Right.
Okay.
And this happened after deregulation. So many industries, and it's also made the quality of work terrible and the equipment horrible that the people use. Because when everybody charged the same price, people chose according to liking the quality of the service or product they received. Now everybody, it's price. Oh, we'll give you horrible service and we'll charge you 5 times more than we used to, but we'll show you a discount of 5%. You're
getting into a whole other area here.
Yeah.
And it's called education.
Yes.
Okay. And there are 2 parts to that. And we should talk about education.
Yeah, we need to.
Not now.
We want people to be aware, Ken, that put themselves in someone else's shoes. Would you like to be the target? Okay, we have a majority, let's say, people that are, not Caucasian, not 100% Caucasian. What if they decide, let's just shoot all the white people? You know what I mean?
Well, Monica, but that's the fear. That is the fear, and that you just played the other side without realizing it.
Yes.
Fear is that they are going to replace, that they're going to kill us off. And you know what? To be very honest about it, they'd be justified at some level, wouldn't they? Because of the way we've treated them. Part of the fear is based on a projection that as we have treated others, they will now treat us. Mm-hmm. And therein lies the ultimate issue for replacement theory.
But that is just as bad.
If we are insistent on keeping other people down in order to maintain our place, our children or our grandchildren or our great-grandchildren are going to bear the brunt of that.
Yeah, they're going to pay the price.
Which brings me up to one last point, okay, that has to be made here. And it's something that I have said over and over and over, that going hand in hand with this is Reconstructionist Christianity. Because if we are in the end times, then worrying about our grandchildren doesn't matter. It makes no sense. There aren't going to be any. Okay? And therein lies that nexus between the right-wing political racism and Christianity, right-wing Christianity. As soon as you think, hey, I got to think about my grandchildren and what world I'm leaving for them, then you start saying, well, what about climate change? What about a world that will be, as you put it, Monica, kind of brown? People will be brown. We'll all be one shade. What about that world? What about a world in which everybody is able to get their needs met, but nobody is getting so much more than everybody? Everybody, you should get based on your effort too and your merit, but that everybody's getting enough but nobody is getting it all. What about a world like that? Could we live in a world like that?
Yeah.
Ask.
It would be wonderful. Well, I hope some people think about this seriously and realize what's going on. And all I can say, people, I don't care what type of Christianity or religion or even non-religion, we're in this earth together. Let's take care of the earth. Let's take care of each other so we can make this world a little bit better. Great topic, Ken. Thank you for wanting to talk about that today. And as always, I'm just going to play a cute little thing for you guys to watch now. And Ken, I can't wait to talk to you about more on some of the things that also pertain to this. So I look forward to it.
We will.
Okay. Tell Zachary bye.
I didn't expect to wake up yesterday to the news that the senator from the 22nd district had overnight accused me by name of grooming and sexualizing children in an email fundraising for herself. So I sat on it for a while wondering why me. And then I realized, because I am the biggest threat to your hollow, hateful scheme. Because you can't claim that you are targeting marginalized kids in the name of, quote, parental rights if another parent is standing up to say no. So then what? Then you dehumanize and marginalize me. You say that I'm one of them. You say she's a groomer. She supports pedophilia. She wants children to believe that they were responsible for slavery and to feel bad about themselves because they're white. Well, here's a little bit of background about who I really am. Growing up, my family was very active in our church. I sang in the choir. My mom taught CCD. One day, our priest called a meeting with my mom and told her that she was not living up to the church's expectations and that she was disappointing. My mom asked why. Among other reasons, she was told it was because she was divorced and because the priest didn't see her at Mass every Sunday. So where was my mom on Sundays? She was at the soup kitchen with me. My mom taught me at a very young age that Christianity and faith was about being part of a community, about recognizing our privilege and blessings and doing what we can to be of service to others, especially people who are marginalized, targeted, and who had less, often unfairly. I learned that service was far more important than performative nonsense like being seen in the same pew every Sunday or writing Christian in your Twitter bio and using that as a shield to target and marginalize already marginalized people. I also stand on the shoulders of people like Father Ted Hesburgh, the longtime president of the University of Notre Dame, who was active in the civil rights movement, who recognized his power and privilege as a white man, a faith leader, and the head of an influential and well-respected institution, and who saw black people in this country being targeted and discriminated against and beaten, and reached out to lock arms with Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. when he was alive, when it was unpopular and risky, and marching alongside them to say, "We've got you," to offer protection and service and allyship to try to right the wrongs and fix injustice in the world. So who am I? I am a straight, white, Christian, married, suburban mom who knows that the very notion that learning about slavery or redlining or systemic racism somehow means that children are being taught to feel bad or hate themselves because they are white is absolute nonsense. No child alive today is responsible for slavery. No one in this room is responsible for slavery. But each and every single one of us bears responsibility for writing the next chapter of history. Each and every single one of us decides what happens next and how we respond to history and the world around us. We are not responsible for the past. We also cannot change the past. We can't pretend that it didn't happen or deny people their very right to exist. I am a straight, white, Christian, married, suburban mom. I want my daughter to know that she is loved, supported, and seen for whoever she becomes. I want her to be curious, empathetic, and kind. People who are different are not the reason that our roads are in bad shape after decades of disinvestment, or that healthcare costs are too high, or that teachers are leaving the profession. I want every child in this state to feel seen, heard, and supported, not marginalized and targeted because they are not straight, white, and Christian. We cannot let hateful people tell you otherwise, to scapegoat and deflect from the fact that they are not doing anything to fix the real issues that impact people's lives. And I know that hate will only win if people like me stand by and let it happen. So I want to be very clear right now. Call me whatever you want. I hope you brought in a few dollars. I hope it made you sleep good last night. I know who I am. I know what faith and service means and what it calls for in this moment. We will not let hate win.